Will Texas A&M's wide receivers be able to get open against Notre Dame's elite secondary?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to run through the most important position battles within this game against Notre Dame. We've talked a little bit about the trenches, but we've got a lot deeper in-depth look, and we'll talk more about the trenches, but we've got a deeper in-depth look at some important battles within this game. And the one that I think we aren't talking enough about, which I think I still believe that the trenches is going to be the most important battle between these two teams. I've discussed that a ton. Still believe that. We'll discuss that in a moment. But one that we're not talking enough about that I think is going to play a huge role in how this game plays out is Texas A&M's wide receivers against Notre Dame's secondary. Right now, if you go look up the top secondaries in college football, according to PFF, number 3 is Notre Dame. Notre Dame will field college football's only secondary with a top 5 player, both at corner and safety. Benjamin Morrison is my number 2 cornerback in the nation and has posted an 86.8 single coverage grade since 22, which paces all returning Power 5 corners. Xavier Watts took home the Bronco Nagurski Trophy in 2023, given to the best defensive player in college football. He led the FBS with 7 interceptions. Point being, they have some incredible players in the secondary. And, you know, it's going to be it's good. How these Texas A&M wide receivers are able to get open will play a massive role in this football game. It's a position that I think for a little while during the offseason was a bit of a question mark. For me, especially those of you everydayers here at Locked On Aggies know that I had some concerns about the receiver room. And then over time, I have now begun to feel better and better. I think that Cyrus Allen playing well, and listen, he worked his way into the starting lineup. So he's fully worked, he got himself good to go. That plus the news that Jabri Barber is going to be back eventually, somewhat maybe even early into the season. Those two things have made me feel better about this room. But when it comes to this game against Notre Dame, how can Noah Thomas, Ja'Day Walker, and Cyrus Allen get open against this elite secondary of Notre Dame? That is going to be incredibly, incredibly important in this ball game. Texas A&M wants to run the football. We heard Coach Elko talk about how he doesn't think it's going to be easy sledding, and I agree with him. It's not going to be easy for the Aggies to just run the ball against Notre Dame. It's not going to be easy to do anything against this defense. They're great all around. There's not a weakness on this defense for Notre Dame. Scoring points are going to come at a premium in this football game, and I think for both sides. But, finding a way to get those guys open is going to be huge. And I think a lot of it's going to have to do with, what routes are they running? You got to make sure they're running solid routes. You got to make sure that they are taking every route serious, every rep serious, every snap serious. And I believe in the talent of these receivers. I know that they have great players in the secondary. I know that. It's reality. But I also know that Texas A&M has really good receivers in Noah Thomas and Ja'Day Walker and Cyrus Allen. I think Noah Thomas is a guy who's set to break out onto the scene and be one of the better receivers in college football. So if the receivers are able to get open, it's going to be huge for the Aggies, but it's going to be one of those tough battles when this game is played. Next, I think the more important of the trench battles for the Aggies is Texas A&M's O-line versus the D-line of Notre Dame. because I feel a lot more confident about how our D line is going to handle their O line, which is what we'll talk about next. I think that our offensive line stopping their defensive line and giving Connor Wigman time and creating holes for Le'Veon Moss and creating holes for Mari Daniels, that is going to be what matters in this football game. I think that our offensive line is really good. This year, I think that it is. Let me rephrase that. Let me back up. Hold up. Wait a minute. Reboot. Rewind. I think our offensive line has an opportunity to be pretty good. I think really good, strong. I think pretty good. I think it's going to be better than last year. I think it's going to be one of the better lines we've seen in a little while, but I don't think it's going to be incredible. I think it's going to be solid. And that's been my stance for weeks now. So if Texas A&M's offensive line is able to just be a stalemate with the D line, just to where Connor Wigman's got just enough time to get the ball out, receivers have enough time to really run their routes hard, and the running backs are able to get some holes and they aren't getting hit 2 yards into the backfield on every carry, then the Aggies will be able to move the football. But if our offensive line doesn't get any push, I don't know how you're going to move the football, especially with how good the secondary is. Because it's not like, well, they have a weak secondary but a strong D line. If you're able to get the ball in the air, you can get somebody open. Not how this works. They have a great secondary as well. So I think that this is something to pay attention to. I really do. I think that if our offensive line is able to get a push, you're going to see a more significant offense from the Aggies. But if they don't, it's going to be tough. And then we've talked about, now moving on to the D-line versus the O-line, we've talked about how Notre Dame's offensive line is inexperienced. Now, yes. So to Notre Dame fans, I think this is a really interesting conversation to me, because you can base things off history, and that's fair. And yes, Notre Dame historically has been incredible with offensive line recruiting. They do a good job of recognizing talent, putting players in the league, all that, no debate. But I mean, you can't convince me. I don't care the history of Notre Dame offensive tackles. I get that it's strong, or offensive linemen in general. I get that it's strong. I understand that. But at the same time, it is not going to be easy for these young guys playing offensive line to walk in. It's not easy for freshmen to play offensive line anywhere. I don't care if they're playing against SEMO. I don't care if they're playing against I don't care who they're playing against. I'm trying to think of bad teams, but you get what I'm saying. And I don't even know if SEMO is a bad team. It was just the first small school that came to my brain, which is funny. But they're going from playing against, and I know they have training camp, they have all that, but this is their first real football game in college football. And you're going to play in one of the most hectic environments in a million degrees, where you're going to, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. So yes, you can talk me into the history of, well, they've been historically great. Our offensive line's been historically great. Doesn't matter if they're freshmen. These guys are all going to be first round picks. I believe all that. But I do not believe that these guys will be able to walk into Kyle Field in this heat against this elite Texas A&M front and just have a field day. I don't. You can't talk me into that. So, well, I understand and I agree that perhaps, yes, their offensive line is going to be fine. I could see their offensive line being okay, but I could also see Texas A&M's defensive line feasting in this game. You've got to understand, Texas A&M's defensive front is, in my opinion, one of the best defensive fronts in college football. So you add that into account. I mean, you got to remember that too. I think Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be fine. I think it's going to be solid. But you've got to remember, it's not like this Texas A&M front is a bunch of nobodies. This is an elite front for the Aggies. I think one of the best fronts in college football. So if the Aggies are able to get a ton of push and get in the backfield and live in Riley Leonard's face, then I think that it's going to be really tough for Notre Dame to move the football. So a goal for the Aggies needs to be to get in the backfield, to make this young offensive line feel uncomfortable and make it a tough day for them. If you do that, it's going to really help your chances of winning this game against a really good football team. The next position group I want to talk about is the Aggies secondary versus the receivers, and the Aggies running backs versus the front seven of Notre Dame. We're going to talk about those two things coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Those of you that listen to the show every day know that I love the Game Time app. It is the best place to go get tickets. It should be the only place that you go get tickets. I was literally at an MLB game last night. And where did I buy my tickets to said MLB game? Game Time. Where will I buy tickets to every game I attend ever in my entire life? Game Time. It is my favorite app. I recommend it to everybody. I promise. Go give them a look. You will not regret it. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Also, want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. You heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Check out FanDuel. Promise you will not regret that. So the next battle that I want to talk about, the game within the game, as I like to call it, is going to be Texas A&M secondary versus the receivers of Notre Dame. And this is another thing that I've discussed a lot here on the show. For Notre Dame fans, last year, Texas A&M secondary was, just awful, just putrid. It was really, really bad. And Coach Mike Elko did a great job in the transfer portal. He went and got a ton of guys who are going to make this secondary better. My confidence in this secondary has already increased a ton. I feel so much better top to bottom about this secondary. This unit's going to be improved. It's going to be so much better. I really do believe that. But once again, you're going against a group of receivers for Notre Dame that's pretty darn good. It's just like every position is for this Notre Dame team. There's a reason they're preseason ranked where they are. This is a solid, incredible roster, one of the best in college football. And, so I guess my point here with the secondary for the Aggies is, hey, we've sat here and we've talked about it. We believe it's going to be great. We've talked about it being great, but will it be? And that is what's going to matter. We have to see it actually end up being great. We can sit here and talk about it being great all we want, but at the end of the day, it has to be great. And this is a great way to get thrown into the fire, you know what I mean? To really find out what you got against a solid Notre Dame team and a solid group of receivers for the Fighting Irish. So seeing how this secondary holds up is going to tell a lot for the season, because if they're incredible, if they're great, this defense is a top 10 defense in college football. If the secondary does have struggles like we saw last year, that's when this defense won't be as good as previously imagined, because the front seven, I believe, is going to be incredible. If the secondary is great too, this is a top 10 defense in college football. That is the reality. So seeing how this secondary plays in week 1 against a really good opponent is going to be something to monitor. The next thing I have here is whoever is listed as the spy for Riley Leonard. Do not forget that Riley Leonard can use his legs. He's got a big frame. He's about 6'4". He's not a little quarterback. He's not your 6'2", 191-pound, run around in circles, dual threat quarterback. He is a strong guy. He's more of a Josh Allen. And it's just with that frame. So it's going to be really interesting to see, are the Aggies going to be able to keep him from running around and picking up first downs. The last thing you want to see is 3rd and 7, and the secondary has great coverage downfield. And then, Riley Leonard rolls out, nobody there, take off, 9-yard gain, first down. Someone's got to be spying on him. The good news here is, once again, Coach Elko, I think he knows this guy pretty well. I could be wrong, but I believe that he knows this guy pretty well. And I think that he's going to make sure that he's going to make sure that there isn't anybody running around freely when it comes to Riley Leonard and when it comes to all that. So it's going to be really interesting to see if the Aggies are able to keep him inside of the pocket and don't let him get out and run in circles, because if he's able to use his legs and he gets running around, it's going to be hard for the Aggies to stop him, in all honesty. But if you can keep him in the pocket, I think that this defense is going to have a really, really good day. Then I think Texas A&M's tight ends against the linebackers or whoever they end up throwing against them is going to be huge, knowing how much Coach Klein loves to use the tight ends in his offense. Tight end in Colin Klein's offense is such an important part of what he does. And I think that this group, and it's going to be a lot of Trey Watson, a lot of Calhoun. We'll see what Donovan Green does in game 1. But Coach Klein's got a ton of guys he can throw in there, whether it's blocking for your running backs, whether it is getting downfield and catching passes, whatever this role is for the tight ends, it's going to be a big one for Coach Klein, because he flat out loves to use these tight ends. It's going to be really interesting to see how he uses them, but I expect Texas A&M's tight ends to play a big role in this game. I could see them, I could see 7 passes caught between a couple tight ends, and I could see you're running off their shoulder or something like that. Coach Elko's talked about it. Coach Klein himself has talked about it. This Texas A&M tight end room is going to be utilized a lot, and we've said that all offseason, but I really can't wait to actually see it firsthand. I can't wait to actually see how they're going to use it in a game, because I believe they're going to use these tight ends a ton. The next thing I have here, and this is funny, this is a really interesting one. If my next one's interesting. I want to have this one for a short minute here. So Texas A&M's front 7 versus the running backs of Notre Dame is going to be interesting. I think that Texas A&M is able to shut down the run game of Notre Dame. I do. I especially if you're able to keep Leonard in the pocket, don't let him escape. But that is definitely going to be an interesting part of this. If the Aggies are able to stop the run game, then a lot of pressures are going to be on the secondary. But if Notre Dame's able to get chunk plays on the ground and through the air, it's going to get a lot harder for this defense a lot quicker. The next thing I have here, the last thing I have, is Notre Dame versus the Heat and the 12th man. I mean, say what you want. These environments, these road environments can be really, really, really tough. I mean, there's no debate that this is something in the head of the coaches for Notre Dame. Playing in heat like this and then playing against one of the best environments in college football on the road, it's not going to be easy to do for this team, for a team full of some young players going to be out there. So, they're veteran a lot of places, but they're also young a lot of places. So seeing how Notre Dame is able to really kind of deal with that is going to be interesting. Deal with the heat, deal with the crowd. That's definitely something that I am paying attention to in this football game, because I think it's going to play more of a role than a lot of people are discussing. So that is something I'm paying attention to in this game, because I know that Notre Dame's preparing for it. It's going to be loud. It's going to be hard for these players to come in and be able to hear. Hopefully you're going to see a lot of false starts. And once again, Aggie fans, this is what I'm talking about. Don't let them be able to, don't be loud. We want that. We want false start penalties. Be loud, and I don't think anyone's going to have any trouble doing that. But seriously, be loud. It's going to help win this football game. I want to talk a little bit about recruiting. There's going to be a ton of recruits on campus for this game. We'll talk about what that means coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But I also want to tell you about our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. I think the best time for a 5 Hour Energy is right after lunch. Tired after lunch? You're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5 Hour Energy shot help leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. With zero sugar in a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone. Try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy, number 5.com today. So it's being reported that about 20 top 100 recruits are going to be on campus for this game. And listen, there's no better recruiting pitch than showing the recruits, A, what Kyle Field's going to look like for this game, because we all know it's going to be hectic, and B, showing that you can beat a top 10 team at home. I mean, if you're a recruit and you're on a visit to Texas A&M and they get a huge season opening win to open up the Elko era, to get things started this year against an elite team in Notre Dame at home in front of the 12th man, can you imagine what that must feel like and what that must be like for these recruits? It is definitely a very, very exciting thing for recruits. And I think that this just shows you, Mike Elko has proven that he is going to truly be a really, really, really good recruiter. And that was my question mark around him, around the hire of Mike Elko when the Aggies brought him in. But I'm telling you, I'm gaining so much confidence about his ability to recruit. And it just, recruits like wins. Recruits like winning. And that's kind of funny. I talked about this under the previous regime. I said, hey, if you keep losing, these recruits are not going to want to play for you anymore. And I think Mike Elko is going to win a lot of football games. I think that he's going to be able to take this program to the level that Coach Fisher was never able to take it. And I think that if he's going to be able to do that, you're going to see some more top 5, top 3, maybe even number 1 overall recruiting classes, especially knowing how good of a recruiter Elko and his staff are and the resources this program has. So a ton of elite recruits are going to be on campus for this game, and it's going to be really exciting to see how many of those guys turn into future Aggies. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for being here every single day. Really, really appreciate it. On Friday, we will have a crossover with the host of Locked On Irish. It's going to be a lot of fun to hear both sides of the story in this football game. It really is going to be enjoyable to break down this ball game. So get looking forward to that. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about keys to victory for the Aggies. And then once again, on Friday, we'll have the crossover between myself and our Locked On Irish host. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day today, and we will see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Aggies.